Welcome to Mental Health Without Borders, the global wellness podcast with Dr. Lindsay Frey, where we dive into the complexities of mental health from a global perspective, exploring how different cultures approach wellness and what we can learn from one another. This episode is sponsored by Finding Hope Wellness Center in Tampa, Florida, where individuals, families, and couples can go to receive hope and healing for their mental health. Go to www.findinghopewellnesscenter.com to find out more. Now, let's get started. Welcome to today's episode. We are excited to have Dr. Richa Khanna, a renowned counseling psychologist with a social justice postdoctoral fellowship, joining us. Dr. Khanna is based in Mumbai, India, and brings a wealth of experience and perspective from her international practice. So welcome to Mental Health Without Borders. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frey. It's lovely being here, and thank you for this wonderful initiative.
Yes, absolutely. And I read on your website that you specialize in working with Asian Indian clients, both within India and across the globe. And your typical range of clients you see are between 20 and 40. Is that correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, do you mind telling me a little bit about your specialties and what you do in your practice?
So I'm a counseling psychologist by training and profession. I got my doctoral degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I did my internship and postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Delaware. This was between 2012 and 19. So I was in the US at that time. So the reason I'm giving you this background to start with is that I think my strength is diversity, because I kind of started. In fact, before I went to the US, my master's degree was specialized in industrial psychology, and I worked in a setup in India for around 2.5 years before deciding to go to the US for further studies. So at that time, my work was more with corporate clients and providing behavioral training for corporate employees, entry level trainees, essentially. But I had the privilege of also at that time working in the career counseling field. So we had tie-ups with schools, and we'd go to schools and work with the ninth, 10th grade students in India. And at that point, they have to make decisions about their future subjects, which subjects they want to specialize in post the 10th grade. And so we do career assessments to help them understand that. And I just recognized the shift that I felt in working with the students plus at least one parent and going over their profile and the results that, would emerge from that. And just seeing the complexity of, family dynamics at play, right, happening right in front of me, and the student, trying to focus on, say, one particular career that's emerged from the profile, but the parents being like, well, this is not really what we had expected, and or it could have been the other way around. I mean, some parents are excited to just see that what they had in mind came through the profile as well. But it's just interesting how the parent-child dynamic was so evident in front of me, and I felt that kind of depth is what started my journey into counseling. And even though my training, like I said, was in industrial psychology, so with time I went deeper and deeper into understanding how that's more of my passion area, and I switched fields completely to counseling psychology, which that's when I moved to the US. And in the US, again, the training was just so diverse. I started with a training in a community mental health clinic, which was a part of our university setup itself. You would see people from the community, provide them low cost services. And then I ended up working in the university counseling center there, as well as two inpatient hospitals. So after having done all of that, now in India, I have my own independent practice where I primarily work with adults. And again, like you said, correctly, the age range is generally 20 to 40. That's when people, I think, recognize the need for emotional support. And I think in India, the acceptance and the language around therapy is gaining more and more popularity. So the work I do now, I think, is a good culmination of my journey, starting right from my master's in industrial psych to the work experience in India to then the cultural shift in the US and, my own identity shifting there as an Indian woman, an international student, working with local clients, working with international students from different countries. So I guess it's not an easy answer to your question. I think that I work with different kinds of people and I'm really passionate about this work. So I feel like it's learning on the go. I mean, it just doesn't stop. And I think that's informing the work that I do more and more. I'm learning to to get in touch with my intuition more and more. I don't rely as much on theory as much as I do on just the human experience and sitting face to face with somebody else and just listening to them. So um I hope that answered your question. I'm happy to provide more details if
It
I
really
haven't.
did. Yes. No. And I found that so much in my own journey and then speaking with other professionals too, that this is such a vast field. Psychology is such a vast field that oftentimes people get in one location, that one specialty, and then it just kind of changes and transforms over time. And that is completely okay. I think that's what keeps it exciting and it keeps us interested and engaged. And sometimes it is like a journey where you're going through these different processes to find really what you love to do and what you're passionate about doing. And so I can definitely relate to that in my own journey as well. And it's one reason why I was so excited to have you on is because I saw a little bit about those diverse experiences that you've had. And I thought, who better to talk to about global perspectives and someone that really does have some of these global perspectives and experiences from your own journey. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's fascinating. And I wonder something that you had said that was a question I wanted to go back to was why do you think mental health is gaining more kind of popularity where you are? Because I've noticed that there's more global attention. Hopefully, we are lowering the stigma and mental health. I've seen that happen over time, over the last 15 or so years that I've been practicing therapy. But what do you think about in India?
Yeah.
Where do you think it's gaining more global
So
attention?
I think I'm trying to think whether it makes sense to separate out the global from the local in this category. What I'm talking about is just access to technology.
Hmm.
And in the way that technology has transformed our lives over the last decade or so, um, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like we use technology to understand ourselves in relation to other people, which is kind of the crux of our identity. So our identity now is being constantly compared at a subconscious level with everybody else around us, and we can't stop it. And that's what technology has done to us. So I think that does impact the kinds of presentations I'm seeing now, like people's social lives, their relationships are coming into focus. Um, People are more open to, you know, uh, this idea of open relationships, which I think is in general, like it just is such an anomaly in terms of, when we think about yeah, the majority. I mean, heteronormative ways of thinking, a monogamous relationship. But now people are like, well, you know what, I'm polyamorous, and so that's coming to the forefront. And even in a country like India. So again, the group that I'm, I guess working with. I mean, there are certain privileges, of course, that they've had. They even have access to technology and this language. People are becoming more and more educated about these things, and it's happening so fast that sometimes, in fact, people come to me and they wonder if they have attention issues. Like, they're like, "Do we have ADHD?" And I'm like, "I think, from my knowledge, I don't think you just get it as an adult. There would have been some indicators in the past, but it's just coming more and more as to, a couple of sessions down the line, someone's like, "Oh, I think I have ADHD." I'm like, I'm not sure. Let's look at that a little more. So, I think there's a direct link there with, like I said, our social media exposure, our reliance on communicating with others throughout the day. In India, WhatsApp is a very popular form of communication. And even I can't tell you how many times I open the app throughout the day. I mean, I'm really trying consciously to reduce that and draw some boundaries. But, these are small things that can manifest as anxiety, as attention issues, as, constant social comparisons. Um, I think on the other, and another darker side of this is it's become so much easier for people to express negativity and hate, which is really unfortunate because people can just say anything to anything I've posted and they can get away with it, you know? Uh, I mean, it's so easy to feel. I know we always use the word trauma carefully, but I think it's just so easy to feel triggered, to feel traumatized by the kind of world that we're living in now. And I clearly see the impact of that on, the clients I'm working with, whether they be in India, whether they be Indians living abroad. I think I can't separate out this feature from just how it's affecting us across the globe, and equally so in India, which is again rapidly um developing in so many different ways.
Mhm. Yeah, and I can absolutely understand the double-edged sword of it. It's something that I see here as well, and with a lot of my clients and just people that I know. The fact that you have more access to information, that can be a positive, that can bring awareness to something maybe that you have struggled with your whole life. But at the same time, some of the information is kind of what I would consider to be watered down versions of different things that people might experience. So it causes other people to relate to it that may not need to be relating to it, if that makes sense, such as like with an attention disorder. So, also social comparison. I see social comparison challenges a lot with my adolescents, my early 20-year-old females that I work with as well. And so I can see kind of the hard side of that too. So I can understand. So if it's technology and social media are global trends where a lot of people are getting their information, that can be both a positive and a negative. And you're seeing that there in India as well. And so, having worked internationally and working in the US, how do you feel like therapy and counseling has differed
Yeah.
across the countries that you
So
practice?
I guess I can speak about only two countries because that's where I've practiced. So um, starting with the US,
Mhm.
I think that the theoretical frameworks in the West are fairly clear. Um, there are certain theories that are taught to us and they are normed on a Western population. Having said that, there are efforts through research to make them more relevant to diverse populations. So ethnic minority frameworks are also available. Um, so I guess I want to say when I was doing or when I was providing therapy in the US, the cultural frameworks, or even say having a feminist lens or humanistic work as a theory, which they are local. So the research exists, and it's almost like saying, I know what I'm doing there. I know because there's a textbook, there's something telling me that this is what you do. This is how the course of therapy can look like for either a white client or ethnic minority client. So race is also a consideration. Um, Coming to India, I feel like I'm having to constantly reevaluate the entire context and see whether my learning and conditioning through my education of 7 years abroad, whether that lens even fits. So I'm really having to kind of backtrack and know, going back to the basics almost of, what, if you don't know what to say. I remember someone saying this to me, a supervisor once told me, like, you don't know what to say, just reflect. Just reflect what the client is saying. Don't worry about, just be
Mhm.
present. You don't have to look at a book. You don't have to follow theory. Just be another human in the room who's listening. So I feel like here I'm really counting on the more universal aspects. And by that, I mean the relationship, um, curiosity around culture, you know, identifying how a person's emotions and intellect and cognitions are responding to the environment around them. In India, every state has its culture and subculture. So there is so much nuance to look at that my being Indian is really just, 1%. 1% is a relatability. I feel like there's so much that even I don't know about, cultures within India itself that I'm having to learn. I'm having to learn on my own. I'm having to learn from clients. So my go-to, like I said, are then those universal aspects, things where I can't generally wouldn't go wrong. Like I said, the humanistic aspects, the empathy, the validation, the connection, just the interpersonal connection, the fact that there's somebody to listen to them and they have all this information that they want to pour out, that they're feeling unheard or misunderstood by other people. So I feel like I rely a lot on that. Another distinct way in which I'm working now that I'm noticing is that there is a need for direction. There is a need to be directive. And I feel like if I don't do that, I will lose out on a lot of chunk of clients, you know. Um, and I say that with an awareness of, yes, that would mean my changing a bit of my own approach and the way of doing things. But then I also, that's a tug of war between, is it that or is it I'm trying to be culturally relevant here? And, I need to do that. And if I want to say I want to adapt my approach to the client, then that does involve a little bit of being the person who is holding their trust in terms of decision making, or like the autonomy may not be the immediate factor at play. For some time during the process, I may have to be the person holding their their direction in terms of, okay, tell me what to do in this situation. I really need your perspective here, which is something I don't think a lot of people sought that kind of way when I was in the US. And I feel like a lot of that is happening now. So it used to be uncomfortable for me initially, when I just started off seeing clients here in India. But I'm gradually learning to be comfortable with that and drawing boundaries as needed, where I feel like, this particular thing is, I need to help them develop their own voice or, independent way of thinking here. And, so I'm learning how to do that a little more consciously now. But as I mentioned before, I am having to rely a lot on my intuition here. I'm having to um, think a bit out of the box, I guess. And I don't think the therapy I do here looks anywhere close to what what I used to do in the US. And I mean, that's okay. I think that's what we do when we're saying we are contextual. Then this is what it can look like, you know. So
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Meeting the clients where they are, and you're helping them with what they need. And so I think it is so important to understand that when you're working with clients from diverse backgrounds, and we are all diverse, we're so different coming from our own unique lens, that we meet them where they are, we assess what that need is, and then try to fill it the best way we can. And so I remember when I was in graduate school, one of the main things that I took away when we were learning all these theories and all these approaches was that regardless of theory and approach, one of the most important aspects of change that's going to happen is the trust and the therapeutic relationship, and them showing up and us showing up, and how powerful and important that fact can be. And that's what you're doing. And so then if we add the interventions and other things to be able to help, yes, we can move that forward process too. But just creating that relationship of trust, confidentiality, respect, hearing them, meeting them where they are, that can produce a significant amount of change in itself. And I do kind of come from that theory that a lot of us do have some answers inside of us. We just have to kind of work through them with somebody else. That could be like a blank slate. And so it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. And I can understand where you go, okay, I learned it here, but it's not incredibly applicable here. So I'll take kind of these bits and pieces of what I know, where my knowledge comes from, my own understanding, my own background, my own culture, and I'm going to put it together to help this client in front of me the best that I can.
absolutely. I think it's a good summary of that.
Yeah, so I'm grateful for what you do, and it's like personalizing therapy for each person that you meet. And I really do think that that's so important. One size does not fit all. I think it's incredibly important. And I'm wondering, I know that, you know, we're talking about the diversity of our work and what we do in our interventions and approaches, but are you seeing common struggles that clients are facing coming to see you? I know in the US I am. There's probably 3 or 4 big buckets of things that I see pretty consistently with the clients that are coming in right now. So what
Yeah,
about
I
you?
think that um, I'd like to focus a little bit on what I'm noticing in terms of gender and gender roles, because I was just thinking more about this, and I feel like the first thing that any human, I mean, just I feel like a universal thing that as humans, the first thing we notice about another person is their gender. Like we make an assumption about how they identify. Um, and in India, I feel the gender dynamics, at least again in the more say upper class, socioeconomic class of society, have changed quite a bit. And by that, I mean, I am noticing, for one, a majority of my clients identify as women, uh, cisgender women. And I'm noticing this shift in the way that they are approaching their own feminine nature. So, there used to be I mean, we are in a patriarchal culture, we are in a patriarchal society, but I do see that shifting now. And I think the concerns that can stem from that are then affecting things like, their relationships. Now I'm talking about some, and I know I'm trying to be as broad as possible. That's not the only struggle, but if you're saying common, then yes. So if we assume a gender binary, then I'm saying both genders are impacted, you know. So women are learning to be more independent, emotionally, financially, you know. There's more freedom in the society for them to voice, to speak up if they're feeling violated. And this is where, when we're talking about the influence of media and technology, it's actually promoting that, right? I'm noticing so many women's groups come up uh, online, especially so many forums where women can speak up, you know. Um, but coming down to the struggles, I think, like I said, the relationship difficulties that some might experience, I think self worth is now being redefined. Women are learning to look at themselves as identifying outside of their relationships and how that feels. So the values are being realigned. They're coming in to understand themselves better in terms of, okay, this is how I've lived my life so far. These were the values that I was conditioned into, but now things are changing and I don't know how to deal with that. Uh, you know, so even things like exploration of sexual identities that are typically considered taboo. Um, there is could be a sense of isolation, even though they are in a relationship or they are partnered or in a marriage. Um, Insecure attachments. I know this is a very theoretical term, and it again gets tossed around a lot, but it's there. Yeah, people are, and I think again this is across the board. Um, the early family environment is shaping how people view themselves, how they view the world, how they relate to other people. And people are learning through therapy to start naming that, to start looking at, okay, this is what happened, and this is what I've learned, and this is how it's playing out in my life. Um, I want to say I feel like things are, some difficulties are, or some experiences are just becoming really complicated. I'm seeing a lot of complex trauma, a lot of grief, losses, addictions. And I think addictions again can look like multiple types of addictions. But again, just the fact that people are gaining a voice and gaining a space to talk about them. I don't know whether they're just being reported more or they used to exist and people were not talking about it. But no, these are the more, I guess, common concerns. I think if I were to really summarize it, it's about relationships. Relationships are becoming more and more complicated these days. People are at times confused about how they should be in a relationship, how they should be in the world, given their life experiences so far, or the modeling that has happened or not happened for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a connection or combination between relationships and personal identity. So the early relationships that potentially started to form their identity, then relationships they're currently in, and then who am I apart from all relationships and within relationships. But it sounds like a really amazing combination of both that you're doing, the work that you're doing. And I think it's powerful work too. I think it's really powerful when you are seeing someone question, shift, and change their identity from when they were raised to who they ultimately want to be and who they want to become. And that's a hard conversation to have with just somebody in your traditional world, your life around you. And so having someone like you to talk to is probably so incredibly important for so many of these clients to say, hey, just be there to help me work this out. This is really hard. It's complicated. And I need just an outside source to be able to share some of these views that I have and these questions that I have. So that's really powerful, really deep, really important work that you're doing. And so thank you for that. And I also wondered too, because something that I see a lot with that 20 to 40 age range, particularly with women, but also with men, is the challenges with wellness and balance, and how that goes together with trying to, you said, discover your identity, to develop social groups, to have your career, to do so many different things that they want to do, while also making sure they have really good balance. So that's something that I'm seeing here. But what about there? Are you having conversations with some of your clients as well about wellness and balance?
No, absolutely. I think the this brings into the focus of corporate culture, and how that's, again, I feel like on one end people are trying to be more sensitive to personal time and work boundaries and work life balance, but I still think that we have a long way to go there, because I think there are policy changes that are happening to ensure, so like employee assistance professionals and EAPs are coming up now more and more in India. um but I'm not sure if that's enough, because I think the mindset is still around, just be available when I need you, like, that's what the superior is, that's the messaging they're getting, is that you got to be available when I need you. And that's just so, it's like, yeah, how do you think about your life outside of work if that's the messaging, and there's always this constant threat of I might lose my job if I don't do this. So so that is there. um However, at an individual level, I think people are trying to take a stand, and they are gradually starting to take those risks of, hey, what if I do speak up? Or what if there's a collective of us that speaks up? Or what if I just like turn off my phone for a bit and just don't answer calls on weekends? So I think gradually that is beginning. But like I said, I do think that we need to encourage organizations and society in general to start being more sensitive on just the human front, because otherwise it's just about checking boxes, and we need to be productive because we're here to earn money. And so
Yes, like you're only as valuable as your productivity, as opposed to you being an individual person. And I think it's so interesting you said people are taking the risk, yes, speaking up for their need for balance. They're taking a risk. But that's where we've come to. So it's interesting because I don't know if all cultures, are navigating that like we are here, but I certainly see it in the US where I do see this more push. And it's one of the reasons why this topic is so important to me, is that I want people to be able to have a good and fair, balanced, and well life. And I think that we're going to achieve that by talking about it more, by bringing more attention to it, by seeing some of the global trends for it, kind of against it, what's happening. And so like in your culture and where you are in India, are there any traditional approaches to like wellness or wellness practices that are really highly accepted and utilized there?
So we have our traditional healing involves several different kind of non-psychotherapy approaches, like if you've heard of Ayurveda and homeopathy, yoga. So there is a entire government department called Ayush that promotes these forms of treatment, which have been with us through, centuries ago. So it's all very much Indian, what the Indian traditional healing looks like. And I will say, I'll be very honest, I'm actually I'm now being drawn more and more to learn more about these ways of approaching health and wellness. It's like this mind, body, spirit connection that I think are operating, but they're operating in silos. So, okay, that here we have a yoga practitioner, here we have a trauma-informed yoga practitioner, here we have an Ayurvedic doctor, here we have a physician who's doing pure allopathy, that is the pure medical model, you know. But again, I feel like we need to take the approach of human first. It's like, what does this person need, and what collaboration needs to happen between disciplines in order to help an individual. And so yes, there's always been a reliance on traditional healing in India, and now we also have psychotherapy, which is trying to set aside from the Western approaches to identifying, okay, what can we do in psychotherapy that's also Indian, that's not informed entirely by a Western approach. So, which that's the complicated piece, I think, is how to integrate that. And because you asked, I'll also share, you may have heard of this approach on, transpersonal psychotherapy, or like transpersonal approaches, which are not necessarily, again, like the fall under the traditional or the typical kind of evidence-based practices, but they do exist, and they're also making ways into the non-traditional or under the realm of alternative healing approaches, which I'm actually quite curious about, because it includes the aspect of spirit, the aspect of the soul, and moving beyond kind of the physical realm. And I do think in the way that we are so externally driven, and our senses are constantly in the outward, in the outward space, I think looking within, that can be a great approach to integrate well with the Indian setup, which I feel India is one of the many of the most spiritual spiritual countries in the world. So I think we have a rich diversity of healing methods that are available to us to explore and to train ourselves in. And I'm personally quite intrigued and very curious to see how I can learn more about that.
Yes, and I think it starts with us sometimes, doesn't it? Where once we take it on and we practice and we start seeing those benefits, then a lot of times we pass that on to our clients as well. And you're right, I think the collaboration part is really huge as well. Saying, hey, you know what, this thing you might be struggling with, this might be a good person to see, this might be a good thing to try, and really having awareness and knowledge of some of those wellness practices around us, and then maybe incorporating them into what we do also, because of how important we're seeing that it is. So I'm glad to see that that's, important there as well. And so do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite or go-to wellness practice for yourself that helps?
So I am on a particular spiritual path that teaches one that's focused basically on meditation and really just sitting in silence. I may not go into the specific techniques that are taught, but I think that's my favorite. and it's been my favorite since COVID. Because there was just so much going on that I naturally kind of gravitated towards, you know what? I think I need to, I think I need something to ground me here because just don't know what's going on. Um, so yeah, meditation, I try my best to practice daily, and I'm a part of a community that follows the same path. And so I think engaging with them is very very much beneficial for my own mental health, my emotions, my inner peace after a long day of work. So yeah, that's kind of my favorite in terms of wellness. I have other things that I do for self care. If you don't mind my adding to that, or thank you. So
And please.
so again, it's like it's
Share.
contrasting to meditation. It's actually going out into the world and getting into theater. So I used to be, when I was a student in Kansas City, I had a bit of a budget for my for my self care. So I joined an improv group, an improv comedy group, and I learned, I took part in one of their workshops. Um, and so more recently, I've actually started doing something like that here in Mumbai, where I've joined a similar group, and it's a small community of a few of us, and we're just learning how to have fun and create comedy out of almost nothing. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot. It helps me be present. It aligns well with my what I'm trying to achieve in meditation is that focus, and in improv you have to be present because that's the crux of it. You can't. There's no line. There's no script that you can prepare. Beforehand. So helps me be more mindful. Again, I'm learning. I'm not the expert, so it's my journey as well. But um, I think those are my two current wellness practices that are really helping me.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I was gonna bring it up if you didn't, just your interest in improv comedy and theater, which I find really fascinating, and as they say, laughter is great medicine as well. I do find that we do take ourselves too seriously sometimes, and there's definitely a space and place for more laughter and fun in our society and culture today. Right. So, love that you do that for yourself, and you found a group because you found that initially when you were in the US, correct? So, did you start your group in India, or was there already
No, I didn't start the group. I don't have stories, and I'm not that confident about it. um, no, there's an existing group that does this, and they conduct workshops. And they have different levels that you can learn. So I'm at the beginners level. Um, I have some memory of, it's just so interesting. It's because this was probably around at least 10 years back that I did the workshop in the US. This was in Kansas City. Um, and I was like, how, I just don't have any memory of it. It's just been so long. But it's fun to go back to, and yeah. And I think the other thing is it allows me to meet with non-psychologists, which I think is very much needed for every psychologist, every therapist. You need to have non-therapist friends.
Mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely, so you don't get stuck just talking about some of these things over and over. Exactly, so having a
Yeah,
diverse group
absolutely.
of friends as well, that's something that you would recommend. Mhm. Good. So I want to know how people can find you if they were curious on about learning more about you. Where can they find you?
I am most active on LinkedIn, and I also have a website, richakhannaphd.com, and that's the best place to learn more about me. My LinkedIn has quite a few. Well, if you want to learn more about what I post about, I think that's a good place to find me and to know more about my
Mhm.
interests professionally.
Yes, I think a lot of people would be interested to follow along and to learn more about you. And I'm so grateful that you came on. Thank you for your time. And on the bottom of the show notes, we'll have all the information about you listed, your website, LinkedIn, and any other connections that you want to put on there. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you for coming on and having this fantastic conversation with me. I appreciated the time, and it was so nice to finally, like I said, be able to talk with you and meet you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And it was lovely just chatting and also learning more about you.
Yes, yeah, I've learned so much just in this short conversation that we've had. So thanks for joining us on Mental Health Without Borders. It's been an incredible conversation, and I really hope that you found some valuable insights to take with you. Remember that no matter where you are in the world or where you come from, your mental wellness truly matters. So be patient with yourself, take time for your well-being, and never forget that seeking help is a sign of strength. Be kind to yourself, and I look forward to connecting with you next time on Mental Health Without Borders.